No one can resist the broody charm the straight-laced Scott Summers so eloquently exudes. Cyclops has been around in the comics since Uncanny X-Men Volume 1 Issue 1 in 1963. As a result, he's had a lot of time to get to know people and fall in love with many different heroes over the years. While you may think of him as being involved with only one or two fellow heroes and that's it, I'm here to tell you that it just ain't so. And Scott, while mourning the loss of lovers, has certainly made connections elsewhere over the years, albeit I would still say pretty sparingly. But it seems no one can resist a mopey Cyclops. Or at least, well, 10 superheroes can, so. Join me as we uncover who those lucky folks are as we count down the top 10 superheroes Cyclops hooked up with. And if you love learning about love as much as we love writing it, be sure to show us that love by clicking that subscribe and ringing my bell. Ring-a-ling, you know I love it when you do. And be sure to stick around till the end of this list where I will have an honorable mention coming your way. Alright, let's get counting. Number 10. Rogue. This relationship never came to full bloom, but it would have had the show X-Men Evolution continued. In this animated series, all of the X-Men are pretty much teenagers attending high school with their teen mutant rivals, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And Rogue ends up having a big crush on, surprisingly, Cyclops. Rogue, of course, is recognized as being one of the hottest mutants around, but does Cyclops care about that? Of course not. He's only got eyes for Jean. However, Frank Parr confessed that Scott's story arc would have had him ending up in Rogue's probably gloved arms, had the show progressed beyond the 4 seasons it was given. During the final episode, we see Professor X getting a vision of the future, and in it you may have noticed Cyclops and Rogue standing quite close together in the group of X-Men. This was a little nod to the series' original intentions for their characters' romantic development. Number 9. PSYLOCKE. While nothing was ever shown as happening between these two in the comics, for a while it seemed like a relationship could have been forming. After Cyclops found himself separated from Jean while working on different teams, PSYLOCKE, who was also a part of his team, began to aggressively flirt with him. Scott also appeared to reciprocate the attraction by flirting back, though the two would ultimately split for their own reasons. For Cyclops, the flirting was putting a strain on his relationship with Jean, understandably, and for PSYLOCKE, she ended up realizing that she was being influenced by Quanon, which could explain the way she had been acting, though not the way she felt, as she still felt that the feelings for Scott were her own. Still, despite the fact that PSYLOCKE is a psychic superhero so totally Scott's type, this is one of the weirdest and confusing romantic pairings we have ever seen for either hero. And in the end, the comics just kind of went like, oh well, this was a mistake, oh, it's fine. Number 8. DAZZLER. While Cyclops of Earth 616 has never shown much romantic interest in DAZZLER, doesn't mean that his alternates haven't. And Scott Summers of Earth 616 has a lot of great alternates, by the way. One of them being Corporal Scott Summers of Earth 70213. He and Allison met during his time on her team comprised of mutants from different alternate universes, who were working together to put a stop to 10 different evil alternate versions of Charles Xavier. During their time together, sparks flew between the pair, though their relationship status has yet to really be set in stone. Still, if Miles and Gwen can make it work, maybe Corporal Summers and DAZZLER can too. Besides, Corporal Summers was recently roaming around Earth 616, so what's to say he might not bump into Allison again and reignite the spark? I'm hoping. My fingers are crossed. They're so cute together. Number 7. Polaris. Polaris is Lorna Doone, the daughter of Magneto. She is commonly known for being involved with another of the Summers clan, Cyclops' brother Alex, aka Havoc. However, in the Ultimate Universe of 1610, while Lorna and Alex still end up being a thing, it's implied that before their relationship, she actually dated his brother, Scott, which is a little weird, because Earth 616 Scott dated Lee Forrester for a time, the captain aboard a ship he worked on, who would then go on to date Magneto in that universe, proving that time, it's really not a thing in the world of comics, because otherwise that whole thing seems a little gross and confusing. What's happening? Number 6. Carol Danvers. Granted, this happens in the alternate reality of Mutant X, but these two end up in a full-on romance together that I feel needs to be acknowledged because of how oddly successful it seemed to be. In this alternate reality, Scott appears to have followed in his dad's footsteps, becoming the leader of the ultra-cool Starjammers, instead of becoming the leader of the X-Men. Guess who else also becomes a member of the Starjammers, similar to her Earth 616 counterpart? Carol Danvers. Well, in the main continuity, these two would make for a really odd pair indeed. They seem perfect for one another here. Carol appears to be the rock that this carefree and ultimately happier Scott Summers needs. Of course, we don't get to explore the ins and outs of this relationship as much as I'd like, but on the surface it seems, well, pretty adorable. I ship it. Number 5. Frenzy. Joanna Cargo was originally an enemy of the X-Men, often associated with such supervillain teams as Alliance of Evil and the Acolytes. However, during the events of Age of X, which Legion caused by using his powers to warp reality, the two were brought together and fought alongside one another. They were even married, and Frenzy was one of the few that Scott could remove his visor in front of due to her invulnerability powers making her immune to his optic blasts. After reality was unwarped, she ended up deciding to keep her memories and renouncing her past ways, becoming a hero and an X-Men. She also tried to rekindle her relationship with Scott, but he really had no interest, though he was willing to let her join the X-Men team. Which is unfortunate because honestly, they were pretty cute together. I want it to be a thing. Scott, couldn't you have just been cool? Be like kinda Age of X you and kind of just normal you? You could be both. Number 4. Colleen Wing. When Cyclops thought that Jean was dead during a time when she was MIA, he ended up spending a lot of quality time with Colleen Wing. There was definitely an attraction between the two of them, but both of them held back somewhat initially. Scott was still hung up on Jean, even though he kinda thought she might be dead, and Colleen thought that the two were still dating, knowing that Jean and Scott were an item through her partner Misty Knight, who had been Jean's roommate. Over time, however, the attraction seemed to develop into a relationship, with Colleen even giving Scott a key to her apartment. But when Jean resurfaced, Scott rushed to her side and explained away he and Colleen's relationship as just that of close friends. A close friend whose apartment he had a key to. I'm sure he didn't mention that part. We never really saw Scott explain Jean's return to Colleen, however, not sure if that means that he just ghosted her or if it just happened between issues, but either way, sad. Number 3. Lee Forrester. Okay, so I know Lee Forrester isn't a superhero per se, but she is pretty darn heroic. And while she might not be superpowered, she was definitely a superhero when it came to Cyclops' love life for a time. Scott was on the ropes when he met Lee. He was mourning the loss of Jean Grey, as he so often is, after the end of the Dark Phoenix saga. Taking some time away from the X-Men, he decided to join a crew and do some work with his hands for a while to help take his mind off of things. He ended up as a part of Lee Forrester's crew. She was his captain. And oh, Captain my Captain, did she have a thing for Scott from the beginning. Apparently no one can resist Scott's brooding and mourning of Jean Grey. Their relationship was brief and included being marooned on a desert island alone together. Always romantic. Well, probably would have been more romantic if Magneto wasn't stranded with them too. Lee was really just what Scott needed at the time and potentially would have also made a great long-term partner for him as well. However, they decided to part ways after feeling their lives were just too different. Lee was a captain and a sailor, and Cyclops was an X-Men and a mutant. Though oddly enough, their lives couldn't have really been that different, as they definitely still run into one another on occasion, cause comics. Lee even made Emma Frost jealous one time. You know you are a rival for romance if you're making Emma Frost jealous, just saying. Number 2. Jean Grey. Jean Grey is probably the love of Scott Summers' entire life, but that doesn't mean the two of them are the best thing for one another. In fact, I would argue that sometimes they are just the opposite. The beginning of their relationship seems mostly sweet and innocent, but everything went pretty awry once Jean got involved with the Phoenix Force and, well, died a few times. Nothing like one of you dying to wedge a divide between you and your betrothed. Eventually the two ended up married, but Scott had to abandon Madeline Pryor and his baby son for this to happen. And in the end, it didn't even end up working out, as Scott had a psychic affair with Emma Frost, while Jean seemed to retreat back to an emotional relationship with Logan. The two will always love one another deeply, but it doesn't mean that they'll always be the best thing for one another. All of their kids continue to be pretty OP though, so at least they have that. And I get that everyone wants to hold on to this relationship because it's iconic, but also maybe we need to let them grow. Maybe we need to let them grow. Maybe it's time. I don't know. Number 1. Emma Frost. Well, this couple may have started off on the wrong foot, a psychic affair and making out on Jean's grave. They have quickly become a fan favorite, with some even arguing that Emma is an even better fit for Scott than Jean is. While I'm reluctant to admit it, you might be right. You might be right. The idea is that the two understand one another better, and Jean herself has even reappeared telepathically after her death to urge Scott to move on, giving the couple her blessing. Though honestly, I feel like that may have just been a ploy to quell all of the Emma/Cyclops hate that Marvel may have been getting. Still, the two have both helped one another in many ways, especially with Emma being an accomplished therapist, which honestly is what Scott Summers needs. Albeit one who did offer to sleep with Scott when he was her patient, and she knew he was married because so was his wife Jean, as they were in couples counseling, so they're kind of both her patients at the time. But still, if you can put aside where their relationship came from, it's really a strong one. And one that in the end I believe was better for both of them. I'm still waiting on that Emma/Scott/Jean triad though, or you know, that Scott, Jean, Logan triad. Just give me one of those. Come on. Come on, comics. Give me a triad. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. I hope you enjoyed this list. Who do you think is one of the most iconic loves of Scott's? Are you Team Jean or Team Emma? Or do you ship him vehemently with someone else? Speaking of someone else, it's time for that honorable mention. Today's honorable mention goes to Madeline Pryor, who isn't really the superhero type, and so I couldn't really mention her on the list, cause, you know, top 10 superheroes Cyclops hooked up with. Superheroes. Still, their relationship was insane and epic, and Maddie deserves a shout out for everything she's been forced to endure in the comics. Hopefully I get to talk about my favorite Goblin Queen and Scott on another list, because without them, we would not have cable. And that's reason enough alone to give them some list love. Speaking of list love, if you enjoyed this list, be sure to show us by tapping that like. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. You stay nerdy, San Diego. That's just all my responses to comments. I want to get more sassy. I don't know if I'll ever be that sassy. And so, Scott, well, and not and so, just and. This was a little nod to the series' original intentions for their characters' romantic development. They're gonna end up together, but they can't sleep together cause it's Rogue. And in the end, the comics just kind of went like, oh, well, this was a mistake. Oh, it's fine. Recognizing how awkward it is. I love when comic writers are like, we'll try this, didn't work, we'll just pretend it never happened. Polaris is Lorna Doone, the daughter of Mingyu. She's a man, woman. She's whatever gender I need her to be when I'm writing, apparently. But on the surface, it seems, well, pretty adorable. I ship it. But only when it's carefree, Scott, because otherwise it'd be too serious. They'd both just be so serious all the time. Be like kind of Age of X you and kind of just normal you. You could be both. Also, that visor was cool. He had a sick visor. Because they were cute. Even though I don't think he's right for Colleen Wing, because she's pretty cool. Their relationship was brief and included being marooned on a dessert. I really want candy. Bye.